To talk about tech and all things great. And I suppose, first of all, Phoebe, what we like to do with any of our guests is to get a sense of, your career, I suppose, potted history of the career, and how you, what led you to become a VC, and what that path has looked like so far in your, I suppose, that corny term, journey, because obviously everyone applies it to founders, but I'm sure VCs quite like to talk about their journey. So I suppose just to educate the viewers, it'd be great to hear a bit more about the success story so far in terms of the career.
Wow, that's very complimentary of you, framing it as a success story. That's a nice way to kick off. It's one of those funny things, isn't it, that everyone's like, oh no, I have a really unusual path into VC, but realistically, I probably didn't. So let's just get that out of the way right now. Although at the time, I never saw VC as an end goal, I think is the interesting thing about my career, from my perspective anyway. So I, at school and everything else, growing up, I was always really interested in kind of more the humanities side and arts side. So I ended up studying English at university. As anyone who studies English will tell you, that everyone tells them that they'll go into two jobs, teaching and or journalism, which neither of which suited me, and neither of which totally makes sense, to be honest. It's not the only thing you can do just because you work in words. But I wasn't totally sure after uni what I wanted to do, and kind of like did a couple of different things, which I think when I got into looking to VC, looking back, I realized there was a common theme across everything, which actually kind of, I like to think, and how I at least tell people it, makes so much sense today. So to kind of whiz through quickly, I started off in what's innovation consulting at a time when, it makes it sound really old, I'm not, but at a time when innovation as a phrase was just not a word that was widely used, and cue a lot of teasing from my family, who just thought it was the most ridiculous job ever. But what I did essentially was help big companies research, research their audience, understand more about their audience, and help them come up with new products or services. So of all the things I've ever done, this is by far the most relevant to what I do today. Got really into consumer insight. And that's something which I really find interesting when we talk to tech companies and startups today is, what's the real kind of need around this, and how do they think about that? But I wanted to do a few things after that. So I also did some time in consulting.
Just ask, on the innovation consulting, was that for a large corporate, or for a tech company, or a VC, or where did you learn that trade?
Yeah, so I worked for a small agency who's actually now been acquired by Accenture. They were called Happen. But we worked with kind of generally FMCG, big companies. So, lots of things like Reckitt Benckiser, some, the kind of projects I do is work with Dettol, and we went to India to speak to the emerging middle class, and Dettol's a massive brand in India and how they use it. And so you'd literally be spending 3 hours with people in their homes talking about how they cleaned their floor, and really getting into the grips of that. Another one, very memorably, was working with Durex in Dubai for obviously the broader kind of UAE region, which is a real, really interesting kind of tension of brand positioning and purpose versus kind of cultural norms around there. And then even lots of things around things like foods, working with companies like M&S, just to, think about how do they do new kind of food concepts and things like that. So it was really fascinating. It's an amazing first job to have. You really got to spend loads of time with people doing the research side, as well as actually thinking of okay, how do you make a product which fits what this person truly wants, not just what we've got the capability to make.
The innovation consulting role into Supernode, but I don't want to skip anything in between the meaty bits, that if there's anything you wanted to kind of sort of lay out there, or was it a straight line to Supernode? And then maybe if you can enlighten the audience a bit on exactly, what, or expand upon exactly what Anthony's just sort of highlighted as the media focus?
Sure. So it wasn't a straight line from there. I spent a little bit of time in more general consulting for my sins, which, just on the topic of large companies, what I really learned in that time was that when I was younger, I used to think that when you become an adult, everyone knows what they're doing in jobs. And I realized in a lot of large companies, no one really knows what they're doing more than you do. So always think about that if you ever get imposter syndrome. I then spent a bit more time on kind of a little bit more ops role as a chief of staff of this property finance company, where I liked the job. I didn't like the industry. It's property is not so much one, despite my interest in interior design, that I'm not really cut out for it. And really, it was at that point I started getting really interested in venture capital. I spent quite a lot of time research and think about it. It's not the easiest industry to switch into, and ended up quitting my job, doing a couple of bits and bobs projects for other companies, and interviewing for VC, and that's how I joined at the beginning of 2019 Supernode Global.
Great. Okay. Wow, that's pretty varied back there. And on Supernode, I suppose you had 1 year of normalized life, and then naturally 2 years of slightly abnormal life, but we've all adapted, as we all know, and we won't dwell on all those changes, because I think everyone's addressed those, and I think actually everyone that I'm talking to at the moment is so looking forward to, still working with some of the good things that came out of the pandemic in terms of communication, but just getting back to office and and perhaps events, and but just to sort of fill in the gaps on Supernode, that I think you're on fund 2 or raising for fund 2. The key focus would be good for any of the founders listening to hear about, and they've always still to this day, and as per what we do at Notwix in the advisory side of the business, there's still so much mystery around a lot of VCs for founders. It's kind of really quite unusual that we constantly find there's this sort of, even though you have websites, it tells people exactly what you do, but then you kind of, we have conversations with people where they're like, oh, we think this VC is right for us. Can you help us? Can you help us design a deck that's suitable for these types of VCs? And you kind of like, it's kind of like, there's still a lot of mystery. And I know VCs in general have tried to enhance and increase their communication, but if you were to sort of, give the spiel that any founder that's listening, to find out whether Supernode's the right business for them to talk to, and people, yourself and others at Supernode to meet, what would that be?
Great question. And I totally agree, by the way. I think venture capital as a general industry is very opaque and quite hard to understand, even if you work in it sometimes. So I would say that, the kind of, to explain first how we phrase it, and then how that would look for a founder. So we kind of position ourselves as investing in the digital content ecosystem, the future of how we play, learn, communicate, work, etc. What does that mean for a founder? So we invest in, we look for founders who are building platforms and tools which are essentially around generally, if you're working in the audio space, or sound, which sometimes people think of as slightly differently, interactive, gaming, visuals, social, messaging, education, those kind of spaces. We're looking for people who are making platforms and tools that help, which kind of focus around content. So if you're making things which help people monetize content, for example, one of our portfolio companies is a platform that helps streamers to monetize their content. So that's an example of that. Maybe you're looking to help people kind of earn advertising on their content and monetize that way. So we've got a couple of more ad tech kind of businesses, or around analytics. So one of our companies, which actually I'm delighted to say was my first exit and has just been announced, You would help podcasting, worked in podcasting to help analytics and attribution around that space. So, it's currently our portfolio goes from everything from audio to kind of this advice to 3D animation for kind of gaming space to quite a few gaming elements to that, into sport, into fitness, into music. You're familiar, I know, with Alina and the Rap Tech team, and kind of much more than that. So really, that's what we mean by digital content. It's sometimes hard to summarize in like a snappy sentence, but I think founders who are at the kind of pre-seed or seed stage in particular is what we look for. We invest at seed. So generally when there's a handful of your founders, they're raising between, I'd say, kind of 1 to 2 million-ish in seed money. And they've started to get a little bit of traction, either from users or if they're B2B, making a little bit of money. So that's the kind of thing we look for.
Okay. And that's global, I'd assume?
Global, yes. Okay. That's a great question. So that's global. Our portfolio to date has been between Europe and the US, just because that's where our networks naturally fell. But we are very much on the lookout for further afield companies, and very excited to see them.
And I know we always talk about this, Phoebe, just the sort of the environment and the kind of where all those great areas of content that you'd think it would be like awash with like highly talented founders creating perfect businesses. But I suppose sometimes, and we, going back to what we see at Notwix, there does seem sometimes to be a lot of repetition of the same ideas and a bit of a, I suppose I personally think in the last couple of years in your verticals, it's possibly become a bit more difficult to find the real gems, and there's a lot of noise, but there doesn't seem to be, from reading about the space as well, as many high quality businesses coming through in those verticals. Or you might refute that and say, Chris, you're talking complete bananas. What do you think?
Well, I mean, obviously I feel like we found quite a few in our portfolio, so definitely those ones. I think kind of to pick up on what you're saying there is, well, the first thing is this space has got a lot of attention in the last couple of years because of COVID. We were all forced indoors, and so the kind of things that we invest in were generally the companies that got a lot of attention in COVID, and they saw quite a lot of growth. We also had kind of more 2021, the concept of the passion economy got really big in the creator economy. So I definitely think there's a level of fatigue that investors might be feeling at this point, or generally anyone working in the space might be feeling, because it's just been such a popular subject. That said, I very much believe there are some amazing founders out there, as much as you'd see in any other sector. But there is something maybe that, because it's just received so much attention in the last couple of years, it feels like there's a bit more noise and signaling. I mean, my belief on the whole ideas area is, I don't think good ideas as a general rule are unique. They're really not. Like, what's really unique? A terrible idea. Very rarely do I see the same really bad idea repeated more than once, because there actually takes quite a lot of imagination. Sort of good ideas are pretty sensible, that like, this is a problem, this is a solution. But it's really around that execution, which is what differentiates someone in the space. So, for example, I think in the summer of 2020, we were looking a lot into the monetization of streaming kind of space, and I came across loads of companies looking at that. All pretty not the same, but all in the similar space. So you could see them all becoming direct competitors at some point down the line. But we did make an investment in that space in a company called Streamly, which is a Polish company who, their execution and understanding of the space was just kind of, I felt, stood them out against everyone else in that space. So, it's I guess there's that nuance there. But no, I very much believe that there are great founders out there. But, you know, the more you see of something, the more it seems to be, they seem to be hidden around.
Sort of, a related aspect there. The impression that I got looking at the Supernode website is that there's a big point about being an added value investor. Would you say that's kind of accurate? And I was wondering if you could talk a bit more about how you guys are adding value. There's a platform component as well. You know, can you walk us through that?
Of course. I think every investor at least likes to be thought of as added value. You know, I don't think anyone likes to position themselves as just money these days, because, you know, the best founders have options and you want to be contributing more than just the check you're writing. In our case, we thought long and hard about what was really important, both to us, to our portfolio. And so a couple of years ago, we made the decision to start building a community around what we do. So I always describe it, if we as a fund are like the bullseye in the center and our portfolio is the first ring, our community is the ring after that. So our community, I think we've got over 300, maybe over 400 kind of early stage founders in this space, all in the similar area that we'd invest in, but we have a little bit more flexibility of how we can work with them in the community. It's based around what online kind of community isn't, around a Slack workspace as our core point of communication online. But we run all sorts of initiatives to kind of work with people. So from, you know, we work, for example, with a group of angels whom we send out investment opportunities to, and we've actually managed to get some investments for people in our community from that group as a result of just kind of communicating with them. We run things like mentorship programs. We run very regular kind of ask me anything style Q&As on the Slack group with people kind of around product or growth, as well as there's kind of a whole roster of other initiatives, things like Founder Circle, talking about fundraising. So that is something we do more broadly for the community, but one of the key things there is to support our portfolio as well. And the idea is like the bigger we get, the more the portfolio themselves and people we invest with and work in will be able to use that community to get introductions, you know, to take part in peer-to-peer kind of support from other founders, just to connect with other people. And because we focus on a very specific area, there's so much overlap that we see that we are seeing people kind of, it's now organically working to, you know, people making connections, helping each other. We do a lot of monitor things like private DMs and so forth on the community. And I have to say, I was really impressed by how much people are communicating and connecting without us kind of giving them pushes and stuff. So that's been really exciting to see. And that's very much what we think of as one of our key value adds. But on a more personal level, you know, I always just want to be, and I know the rest of my team, this is the same, we just want to be the first call for our founders and them always be comfortable calling us. When founders do call me up on a weird time on the weekend, I take that as a massive compliment. And so kind of just, we always want to go above and beyond where we can, be it helping them sometimes more emotionally, as well as helping them more operationally.
Yeah, I think that's, that again, going back to, you know, we were talking earlier about, you know, the mystery around VC and everything. I think one of the other things that a lot of founders we've worked with, I suppose I'm going back, you know, gosh, when did I sort of first started talking to founders in 2009. So I'm showing my age here. But the key thing that also comes about, which I think Supernode's good at, as you've just explained, at addressing here, Phoebe, is that a lot of founders have always said they're a bit scared of VCs. They find them impersonal. They don't like some of the people they meet in that area. I mean, I won't name any of the particular founders, but you know, it's kind of like, you know, it's almost like, you know, they don't like them, and they don't, you know, and I think with, you know, Gen Y and Gen Z and, you know, or the new generation, I think, you know, personal feeling, empathy, emotional attachment, you
It's so
know,
important.
yeah, it's really important. And I think, you know, it's I know it's all corny and everything, but you know, we've had instances where, you know, I've been talking to founders and they're like, but I you know, I just don't want to take investment from these people because I just don't like them. You know, I just don't feel a chemistry. So, I mean, I think you're doing a great job there with all the things you just explained, Phoebe, of the community. It's not like, you know, gobbledygook. You actually do it because we've talked to a number of your founders and they feel part of the community. I mean, Anthony, I think you may want to add to that.
Yeah, so I mean, often when you see a list of values on a company website, you can feel that there's sometimes a disconnect between what's said and what's done. But based on your answer and what Chris has just said, I was having a look at the values on your website: hustle to help, push for excellence, cultivate curiosity, be radically real, thrive together, shape a better future for everyone. I mean, as Chris said, it could come across corny, but seeing it flow through from, what you're saying publicly, but then also the work that you're doing, it does, seem that there is a big culture at Supernode.
Good.
I mean, I'm very flattered and I'm really pleased that you guys kind of picked up on that. Hustle to help is definitely, we try and make them alliterative so they're easier to understand, remember as well.
Clever.
Hustle to help is really a big one, and especially for me. And that means always going above and beyond for our portfolio, for our community, for our people we work with, for our colleagues. And I think that's really important. It's funny about kind of what you're saying there, Chris, around like sometimes VCs being not coming off the best. I think there's really a shift we're seeing. There's things like VC brags, I'm sure you're familiar with on Twitter, but for anyone who isn't, which kind of highlights literal VC brags on Twitter, VCs bragging about things, and maybe the less well thought out, like slightly less kind of emotionally intelligent comments that are made. But also, it's a really power dynamic you've got to be aware of in the room. It's not my money, but I do represent the kind of choices and the investment opportunity. And so there is always that dynamic of, founders being super conscious of that, because of course they are, who wouldn't be in that situation? And I think it's really important to be just really thoughtful. We don't want to work with founders who we don't like either. And there's I've definitely come across more abrasive, should we say, founders on my side. But imagine that with that power dynamic as well. Like if the VC or whatever investor is on the abrasive side and they've got, they're the ones in that kind of position of control, power, it can create a really uncomfortable relationship. And so that for me, I always think I'm going to work with someone, especially as we invest at seed, kind of up to 10 years likely. So got to really get on. In terms of kind of some of our other values about being radically real, one of the things I think I overuse on conversations with founders, I was like, I want to be really transparent, because as soon as sometimes there's some really uncomfortable conversations you have to have, even if you're investing. We're in legals with an amazing team, which I'm leading. And I had to say, like, look, this is the point. I'm going to sit on the other side of the table from you. And so there will be this awkward bit of time where we're going to be negotiating against each other. I do want it to be, I want this to be a conversation. I don't want it to be a battle. I think we have the relationship so we can get through this and explain to the sides and come to somewhere we're really happy with. Because who wants to start a 10-year relationship with someone feeling cheated on one of the sides? But you've kind of got to call out these awkward moments, I think. When I was interviewing to join into VC firms, I was also dabbling a bit with mid-market PE, because, which I'm glad I didn't go into. I don't think it suited me. But I remember this one interview I had where, I won't name the fund, but I believe they're doing quite well. Relatively new company. And it's an interview, so I'm, as one might imagine in this situation, but I like to think I'm quite nice anyway, but trying to be really polite, animated, enthusiastic, all those good things. And and part of this is kind of asking more about the company and the individual interviewing me. And at one point, he kind of pauses and looks at me, and he went, "Do you think you're just too nice to be in investing? I think you're just too nice for this." And I mean, spoiler, I wasn't invited back for that interview. And I kind of told the recruiter, I was like, "I don't think this is a great fit." But that's really stuck with me, because who wants to work with a jerk?
I mean, yeah, what does that say about their culture, right?
What does it say? And I was like, in what situation would me being kind of rude or abrasive, I guess, is what
You're
they
hired.
want? In what situation would a founder, and obviously mid-market PE slightly different, but still you're talking to the founders often of companies that they've worked at for years. In what situation would being like would be creating a negative experience to work together, be in some way then being like, you're the person I want to entrust the future of this company to, or you're the investor I want to work with for however many years. I think it's quite an old-fashioned view that. I won't go into some thoughts I had about maybe some of his personal bias, because I think that's relatively obvious. But you know what? When someone once told me that they thought that they thought I was a really nice person to work with, I've taken that as a massive compliment ever since, and kind of gone out my way to be polite, to be thoughtful, and to be kind, because that's who I think I'd want to work with. And at no point has any founder I've ever worked with been like, you're just a bit, wish you were more abrasive,
Yeah. Could you be a bit meaner to me, please?
Just a little bit meaner. I mean, maybe I'm sure there are moments they think you're not quite as nice as you're making out, but they're maybe saying a bit of an honest truth. But it's such an odd kind of old-fashioned view, and I think it adds what you're saying earlier, Chris, about like, sometimes there's this kind of slight fear around investors, because of course there is. If there are people, thinking that's the right standard to be holding with people.
I'm sort of diving back into the year that is 2022, and I suppose we everyone's overcooked the whole metaverse kind of thing, and we do have a number of decks that God bless some of the people out there, but I'm that mention metaverse. I'm a novice at metaverse. I'm trying to become more educated, but I get it in essence. And I suppose the question around it in the terms of Supernode is, have you, as being more expert in this space, have you seen a kind of, obviously a flurry around metaverse type content, and actually have you seen some good stuff? Because obviously everyone's quick to sort of like go, oh, it's a load of bananas and it will be 10 years in the making and it's going to be a battle between Samsung, Apple, Microsoft and Facebook, and Facebook have got the lead, and I get all that, but I'm just kind of, I know big trends create new industries of startups and scale-ups, and I know we're very early days. I'm just conscious to hear, as an expert, what your thoughts are on that area.
Well, I wouldn't call myself an expert in this area quite yet, but I hope to become one in time, or at least closer to one. We have indeed seen a lot of companies, or a lot of decks, where the words metaverse, blockchain, NFTs are liberally sprinkled throughout.
Have you had one that has all three?
Plenty, yes.
Buzzword bingo.
It is, unfortunately. So
Patrick.
to step back slightly from that, the metaverse is a word I've definitely heard too much in the last 6 months. I don't think I will ever forgive the company formerly known as Facebook for using the word meta, because not only does that ruin the word meta for me, which has other meanings, but they've really confused, I think, the whole landscape. But what's done is done. So my understanding of the metaverse is a series of kind of digital immersive experiences that in that we hope in the future will be more immersive and connected. My personal view is that we are so far from the metaverse, as one imagines from Ready Player One, that just this whole thing will blow over. It will be kind of like video conferencing companies in 2020. This all will blow over, and then we'll see the real companies emerge in the next kind of 5 or so years. But we're not in the metaverse as far as I'm concerned. We won't be for a while. But we are starting to understand what that might look like in the future. So that's my personal view on the metaverse. And yeah, I do think there has been a slight overuse of the word. But so I think it's a really exciting concept, but it is quite far away.
I have a boring example of the metaverse. A friend of mine started a new role, and he was telling me they had a bunch of orientation workshops that were all in VR. So you're sort of like wandering around different places, and you click on things and it tells you about the HR policy or this, that, and the other. So like I said, not as exciting as Ready Player One, but it is sort of like, people trying to bring the metaverse into your experience.
And people forget that in Ready Player One, I think one of the only free planets which was available was, I think, called Ludus, which was the school and education planet, which is like one of the core concepts of actually people would go, school kids would go into school in VR and do pretty much what you're saying there, Anthony. And that's actually one of the real fundamentals of this kind of oasis that was built. So the opportunities of things like education and learning is massive, and also that more interactive experience that can create, and bringing loads of different resources together that different people have made, but kind of creating them in one space. That's exciting, I think, as well, and often overlooked.
Great. Okay, fab. Well, thanks for that. I think, and thanks for your time. It's been good. Great to catch up. And hopefully I'll see you face to face at some point in the next few years. And thanks for today, Anthony. I don't know if you've got any other comments to part with.
No, we'll leave the Facebook thing for another time.
Another time, maybe when it's gone up again. I do have shares on Facebook, unfortunately.
It'd be an episode in itself. Yeah. All right. Well, look, good to talk. See you soon.